May I unfold the meaning of the Tathagata's truth. May I unfold the meaning of the Tathagata's truth.
Good morning, everybody. So good to be with you all this morning. First, just thank you for being here. I see folks at the Zen Center. Thank you there. I see Shoju and Sarah, Jenny, Carrie, and then my site isn't as good, but thank you. I see some more folks over there. Thank you. Kirk, Lincoln Zen Center, welcome. All right. And Chris, Heather, Keith, good to see you. Eric, it's wonderful to see you. It's been a while. Jay, thank you for coming. Mani, Tozan, and Max. All right, just want to welcome everybody here. Today, well, first I want to mention that at the Nebraska Zen Center, I think three folks from the Zen Center are in Japan right now, which is super exciting for all of us. They went to celebrate the 100th anniversary of one of the two founders of Soto School of Zen in Japan, and that is Zen Master Keizan Jokin. So Taizan, our resident priest, is in Japan, as well as Vicky and George. So it's super exciting to have them as representatives there, and I can't wait to hear back from them when they return. It's just it can be such a mind-expanding experience to go to another country and then to practice and see what Zen is like in the country where it came from. Today, I would like to talk about. This is part of a series of talks that I'm giving for the Nebraska Zen Center about optimizing. I'm using this word, optimizing Zazen. And this is point 1B. So the point 1A was on exercise. Point 1B is on what I'll call food, or as I'm thinking about this, nourishment. And I'd like us to think about this nourishment in a much broader context than simply food. And maybe you'll catch that when during this talk, that when I say the word food, I mean it in a much broader context than what we usually think of when we think of that word food. So what I would like to offer you in this talk is 3 points. And as I'm talking, if you have questions that come up for you, please, I hope we can have a vibrant discussion afterwards. I want to offer some traditional Zen. That's point 1 on this idea of food. Point 2, I want to offer personal experience. And point 3, I want to offer you a bit about the science of attachment. And so hopefully these 3 things will come together. Now, I have expanded on this greatly in the article that I'm in the process of creating called 8 Points to Optimize Zazen. So if you want to read more about it, then I'm happy to share that link with you. But it's a work in progress. So what I'm going to share here is just, some aspects of that I feel are particularly relevant for us. So let's start out with number 1, the tradition. What does Zen say about food? Zen says actually a lot about food, and I could have picked from a whole host of things. Many of you have heard of the instructions to the cook, the Tenzo Kyokun, but I'm not going to offer anything from there. What I'm offering is coming from a fascicle on Dogen's rules for the monastery. And this first statement is so broad that it's not limited to monastic life. So if you feel like you got to live in a monastery to get something out of this, it's simply not the case. But what does Zen Master Dogen say about food? Again, he says a lot, but I'm just going to focus on this very, very broad statement. He says, Just let the Dharma be the same as food. Wow, right? Just let the Dharma be the same as food. Now, keep in mind, this is a writing about the Dharma of taking food. Fushiku Hampo is the Japanese, if you're interested in learning more about that. And it's in Dogen's, what's called the Shingi. Just let the Dharma be the same as food. So, first question I want to ask you guys is, what is the Dharma, right? What constitutes the Dharma? So I want to pause just for a second and maybe take a moment to think about that on your own here. What would you say the Dharma is? I just pause for a moment. Just think about that for a second. When you hear the word Dharma, what is Dharma? If anybody has some thoughts on that, I'd love to hear them. It doesn't have to be a really expansive thought, but just, first things that come into your mind when you hear the word Dharma. What does that word Dharma mean?
So, if nobody else is going, I have a thought. So, in my experience, actually have formally the definition of Dharma, and I forgot it. So now I'm just left with how it makes me feel in spirit. It is interesting in trying to articulate how hearing the word Dharma makes me feel. And this is incongruent with everyone else. I'm explaining my experience. It seems that it's some sort of feeling of virtue in a Buddhist way, because it's
Huh.
not good in terms of like this is what you ought to do. It's more good in terms of an action to be done, like a virtuous action, but said in the Buddhist Japanese way. That's how
Hmm.
a vague sentiment of virtue. That's how I understand Dharma.
Oh. Oh, yeah, yeah, that's beautifully said. Wow, I love that. It has to do with action. It's a feeling, virtuous action, perhaps. I think so. I think so. Yeah, there's many ways you can, there's many ways that we can perhaps think about or say what the Dharma is. Jay says phenomena. Yeah, if the context is nourishment. Yeah, Jay says phenomena. The Dharma is phenomena. What is phenomena? I love that one. Phenomena. Um, yeah, everything is phenomena. The stick, the chair, the window, everything is phenomena. That's true too. Or basic Buddhist teaching is that the Dharma is the teachings of the Buddha, right? Dharma is teaching. But I want to connect with something that maybe I like the idea of Dharma as feeling, because I want to suggest here also, not to eliminate any particular definitions, but where I want to take this is the Dharma is love. Maybe it sounds so cliche or something, but I would like to suggest that the Dharma is a feeling of love. And by love, again, that's another word that we have to define. Words. Words are so unhelpful. But the feeling of love that comes when, or the feel, I should say, the feeling that is present when we're around good friends. Let's say that. Maybe that's one way that when we're with good friends, there's a feeling there. Or even the feeling that comes. Now, since I'm a father of a newborn once again, the feeling that comes in holding a baby to your body, right? That's a one way to think about love, right? So this talk, well, we'll share some of that. Like, what is that personal experience for me? Like holding a baby close to your body, that feeling, or the feeling that rises up when you're around good friends, right? There's something there. And maybe we can call that love, but there's some connection, there's some bond there. Okay. So let's go on now. There is a verse we chant when we put on our Buddha robe, right? These robes, these rakusus that some of you are wearing. It goes, how great the robe of liberation, a formless field of merit, wrapping ourselves in Buddha's teachings, we free all beings. So we take the robe and we wrap ourselves in it. This is a wonderful gesture of the love of the Buddha. And interestingly, what is this okesa, this Buddha robe, patterned after? It's patterned after the rice fields. It's patterned after the food that we eat, right? So we're wrapping ourselves up in the symbol of material need, right? That none of us can survive without that physical, that nourishment. And my teacher often said that the meaning of wrapping ourselves in the robe is that may we never go hungry for spiritual nourishment, or may we never go hungry for spiritual nourishment. So why, yeah. So why did the Buddha pattern the robe after the rice fields? Maybe that's another way of getting at this point around the Dharma as love, as nourishment. Because the Dharma nourishes us exactly like food nourishes us. In fact, in the West, we make this dualism between spiritual and material. Right? Spiritual is on one side, and that has to do with. So we say, oh, the Dharma is teachings. It's something that can be found in a book on pages of paper, or something that a teacher is saying. But Buddhism doesn't make that clear dualism, that clear distinction that the Dharma is this teaching, and then there's the material world. There's not that duality that splits up Western thinking, right? The spiritual versus the material, or there's the spiritual world, and then there's this material world. No, that is absent. That's absent in Zen, right? So the Dharma isn't simply spiritual nourishment. It's the actual food that is on our plate, what we ate this morning. The food that we ate this morning, each of you, I'm assuming, had breakfast. I'm assuming you all had breakfast. That was the Dharma. You already got the Dharma. You've received the Dharma. However, we often don't realize it. And this is the thing, we're not aware that the Buddha's teaching is it's constantly flowing into our lives and in through our body, in through the orifices of our body and mind, right? Through the mouth, through the ears, through the nose, through the eyes, through the skin. The Buddha is constantly nourishing us, but we're not aware of it. So the question is, how do we become more aware of it? And one way to become aware of the Buddha constantly teaching us the Dharma is to recite something or to make some kind of ritualistic gesture before you have a meal, before you eat something. All right. And there's a wonderful, I want to share 3 gathas that you can say. One is from the Zen, from Soto Zen, and we do this at the Nebraska Zen Center. Taking food and drink, vowing with all beings to rejoice in Zazen, filled with delight in the Dharma. Right? Even that meal chant, it connects the Dharma with food. rejoice in zazen. We can't do zazen if we're not properly nourished. We don't have a full belly. And that's not to say that we should sit with a full belly, but we've got to nourish us. We've got to accept and receive the nourishment. And when you sit zazen and you're receptive, you're absorbing the Buddha's teaching in zazen in the same way that your body is absorbing the nourishment from the food that you're taking in, right? So we want to sit in such a way that we feel that nourishment. And when we sit zazen with other people, we're experiencing them nourishing us. When I sat with you this morning when we were doing zazen, I could feel the embrace of each of you here. We're nourished beyond our thought about being nourished just by coming together in the same space to sit, whether it's in the same room or virtually. Of course, I have the preference to sitting together in the same space, but even at a distance like this, that we're in the same time space, we can experience the nourishment of each other. We're feeding each other beyond our conscious efforts to do so, just by sitting and being open and receptive to the present moment. We're feeding each other. Thich Nhat Hanh has a version of the meal gatha that is it's the same Chinese characters that we use for our meal chant in Soto Zen, but he has made it more poetic. It goes like this: this food is the gift of the whole universe, the earth, the sky, and much hard and loving work. May we live in a way that makes us worthy to receive it. May we transform our unskillful states of mind and learn to eat with moderation, aware of those who have less to eat. May we take foods that nourish us and prevent illness. We accept this food to realize the path of understanding and love. So that's another version that you could potentially consider doing for yourself if you like that one. And feel free to reach out to me if you need some ideas or suggestions, or you want to do any of these ones that I'm mentioning for yourself. But I would, just to sit down and palms together. And the third one I want to mention is from Gary Snyder, another poet, Zen poet, in the Rinzai school. And he says, how's it go? We venerate the three treasures, teachers, the wild, and friends, and give thanks for this meal, the work of many people, and the sharing of other forms of life. It's another one I love. But, so if you have your own meal chants when you're eating at home, with your family, at work. Now, if it doesn't seem appropriate to do any of these around the people that you happen to be with, you can always say it to yourself, or even just a simple thank you for this food, or just a simple recognizing this is the Dharma that's right in front of me. This is the Dharma right in front of me. All right, the Buddha is teaching me on my plate. All right, what's on my plate is Dharma. Okay, so now number 2, I want to offer a personal story and this idea about the Dharma is love. And I mentioned this holding my daughter and the feeling, right? The feeling of pressing her in against my body, just so wonderful. And helping my wife Jisho, whom many of you know, to nurse. And I had this reflection this past week about doing this, like this action of nursing. And all of us at one time in our life, at the very beginning, we were so dependent on our mother or our parents to receive food, right? Completely dependent. And if in the case that you're nursed, the first teaching you get is from your mother, right? That's that milk that's coming out, and that is the Dharma right there. That's the Dharma. You don't have to open a book. The baby is just, is soaking up food from the mother. Now again, when you go into a hospital, they tend to really split up. This is what I know is they split. There's the material world, and you got to get certain amount of ounces of milk into the body. But there's something else happening too that we can also recognize, that it's not just food that is being digested, that is being incorporated into the body when an infant is feeding. And again, this is whether it is from a breast or from a bowel, doesn't matter. It's not just the physical nourishment that's being drawn in, but it's the love of the caregiver that is also being drawn into the body. Baby's not thinking about it in that term, right? But there's a feeling, right? There's this, and we can call it nourishment. We can call it love. There's something happening there, and there's also, it's not just this love, but on a physiological level, there is an exchange of hormones taking place. There's the oxytocin, that hormone that helps to create a sense of bonding, and none of us can exist without that bond. That bond is so absolutely essential, and it's not just essential for an infant, it's essential for all of us. Regardless of where we are, we need that sense of belonging, of being a part of something, we exist, another way to say it, we exist in relationships. We don't exist as individual isolated selves. We exist in relationship to others. And this is so obvious on the infant level. There's so the saliva from the baby's mouth is entering the mother, and that communicates to the body of the mother what antibodies to produce in the milk so that the baby stays healthy, and then the milk is fed into the baby. I mean, it's just an amazing thing that takes place there. There's this constant communication, and there's also the regulation of the nervous system is taking place. How does that happen? When the baby is not mature enough to self-regulate. That's not what happens. A baby cannot self-regulate. They're dependent on being physically close to their caregivers in order to learn the body. All of us had to learn how to regulate our own bodies, and we did that by being in close proximity to our caregivers. They taught us, their bodies taught us how to regulate our own nervous systems. So here's another way to think about this. We nourish each other through the quality of our attention. And Zen practice, let's bring it back to Zen. Zen helps us to improve that quality of attention so that we're not distracted. We're paying full attention to whether it's an infant or your family in some whatever way, or your Zen community or your work community. We're paying attention to what we're doing. We're nourishing others. That's Zen practice, is to nourish, is to feed others. And now you can see that food isn't simply this material stuff that we provide. I mean, it's interconnected with a feeling of nourishing others, right? We want to bring in that sense of kindness, of love, of care. That's a part of it as well. And I will add that you can enter into samadhi through nourishing others, right? So Zazen, we talk about the three as precepts: samadhi, concentration, and prajna, wisdom. You enter into samadhi through nourishing others if you're 100% there, right? I've felt that holding little Pema, the experience of deep concentration is present there. And it's because of her, right? I'm nourishing her, but she's nourishing me. She's nourishing my practice, my deep sense of concentration. When we nourish others, it's reciprocal. It goes both directions. Isn't that wonderful, right? It's not it can be a hardship. Absolutely. There's hardship in nourishing others. Yet, if we are receptive, we can also experience for ourselves samadhi right there, right there. You don't have to just sit cross-legged. So if you don't want to sit cross-legged, hold the baby for a little bit. You enter into deep samadhi. And the children, also, they nourish us, right? If we're really 100% there, and that's the point of our practice. We want to be 100% there. If we're really 100% there, we'll receive nourishment from our children, from our families. The family is the foundation for love in our society. That's where love is generated. And we can start anew right now. If you didn't like your family, okay, we all have stuff around family, right? But we can change it any second. And this is where practice really, this is where the rubber hits the road, right? Family is the center for where love emerges in our own hearts. And the family is the microcosm of the society. What happens in the family is like a little universe of what happens in the larger society. So it behooves all of us to work at where we can. That's our field of influence, is the family. So if we can, to the degree that we can show this love in our own immediate families, then we're going to be able to express that in the wider society. Now, this brings me to the third point that I want to mention, the third and last point, and that is the around the science of attachment theory. What I mentioned earlier, when we give food, when we give physical food, we're giving more than this physical nurturing. Right? There's also the hormones, there's the oxytocin, there's the regulating of the nervous system, there's the creation of bonds of attachment. Now, attachment is very important in Western psychology, and it's a different kind of attachment than we talk about in Buddhist understanding. This idea of attachment as a negative thing in Buddhist in the Buddhist world. And if you want to understand the distinctions between attachment theory in Western psychology and attachment in Buddhism, I would highly recommend a book by Harvey Aronson called Buddhist Practice on Western Ground, where he delineates these two ways of understanding attachment. We can get confused here. So I don't want to, I know I risk confusion. But attachment forms the foundation. Attachment, now I'm talking about Western attachment, forms the foundation for healthy relationships for the rest of our life. That attachment. This is a quote from John Bowlby, one of the proponents of what's called attachment theory. He says, intimate attachments to other human beings are the hub around which a person's life revolves, not only when he is an infant or a toddler or a school child, but through his adolescence and his years of maturity and into old age. Wow, that's a really profound, again, it's a really profound thing. If you take that seriously, the importance of early childhood attachment, that bond that is created at the between the infant and the child and the caregiver. And here's one from his colleague Mary Ainsworth. And by the way, if you're curious about where I'm learning these things, John Bowlby, Mary Ainsworth, this was the heart of the trauma-sensitive yoga teacher training that I participated in a number of years ago. One of the pillars of trauma-sensitive yoga is it's grounded in attachment theory and recognizing the importance of that bond in early childhood between the child and the caregiver. So Mary, and I think it has deep ramifications for us in our ongoing spiritual growth. So Mary Ainsworth, she writes, an infant whose mother's responsiveness helps him to achieve his ends develops confidence in his own ability to control what happens to him. All right, let me read that again. An infant whose mother's responsiveness helps him to achieve his ends develops confidence in his own ability to control what happens to him. So what is needed, according to Western psychology, is consistent, sensitive responses from our caregivers. And when that takes place, I know we all screw up on this, we all make mistakes here, but to the degree that we can, when we are able to offer that to our loved ones, to our children, that creates a sense of safety in the world, a sense of trust in others, right? Because if your caregiver is consistently responsive, then you trust them. You learn how to trust. That's where the foundation of trust lies. And a sense of yourself as worthy of care, that you are worthy of care. And so when you sit zazen, you know you are worthy of receiving the Buddha's teaching, right? That's not something, it's not a moral, it's not an ethical thing here that you're worthy. It's that whether you realize it or not, all of us are worthy of that. It's not an ethical statement. We're all worthy of receiving the love of the Buddha, no doubt. But the question is, how receptive are we to it, right? Okay, so this begins this sense of uh, of being receptive begins at the very beginning of our life. If, on the other hand, an infant is exposed to chaos, violence, or neglect, they learn to see the world as dangerous, they see people as not trustworthy, and they don't see the self as worthy of care. Now, these are, of course, extremes, right? We have on one end is the perfect parent who's consistently aware of the needs of the child, and the other hand is the neglectful parent or the abusive parent. And probably most of us lie somewhere in between those two poles. But I think it can be helpful to have a kind of a model for how important it is that we develop the sense of nourishment, of nourishing others, right? Each of us can continue to develop the sense of seeing others and with the desire to nourish them and to receive nourishment from them. It goes both directions, right? We want to go both ways. All right. So that's what I wanted to share. I have a sense there may be some questions, and I really welcome them for clarification purposes. So I'll close with this short poem. Food. Food is the Dharma. Dharma is love. Wrapping our children in love, we create a loving world. Thank you.
Anyone have questions, comments on this?
Yeah, I have one. Thank you, Daishin. My question is, let me know when I can come visit to hold Pema.
Yeah, I'd love for you anytime. Come whenever you can. And that's an invitation to anyone. I'd love to bring her to the Zen Center too. It's a little premature to travel at present, but yeah.
Thank you. It's wonderful, wonderful talk.
Thank you. Yeah, and if you have nephews or nieces or grandchildren or whatever, you know how precious it is. We don't have to make this strict dichotomy between Zen practice on the one hand and family on the other. It's totally integrated. Yeah. So take care, whether they're infants or older. And you can do the same with your parents if they're still alive. Potentially, you can do the same with your parents to show them your love.
Just coincidentally, this week in our Dharma book club, we've been studying Living by Vow by Shohaku Okumura, and it was the chapter on meal chants. And yeah, he was kind of covering the same topic of Dharma as food and food as Dharma.
Very
So
nice.
interesting coincidence there.
Interesting. Yeah, the transmission of the Dharma is seamless.
What you were talking about as far as like attachment and like, so like for the practicum I'm doing, I'm running a group in like an inpatient setting, and because of my practice here, like I get to do whatever topics I want. So because of my practice here, I'm very like mindfulness forward and self-compassion forward, and like, so when I do a group about self-compassion, like we do talk about like the barriers to self-compassion, and one of them being if we didn't get it, like while we were growing up from our caregivers, that can be a barrier, but you know, for all the reasons that you talked about, like it's as much of a learned thing as it is anything else, you know, and then maybe we get these negative views of like self, others, and the world, but like the thing that I emphasize is that, and you went into that like biology science piece of it, and so I talk a lot about like the threat system and the soothe system and like oxytocin, like you can't be in threat mode and soothe mode at the same time. And so when we receive compassion and care and kindness from others, that activates our soothe mode, which kind of like interrupts that threat system. But the thing is that we don't actually have to wait for other people to give it to us. We can direct it towards ourselves. And that also activates that soothe mode. And so in that way, like hopefully if we didn't get that as a child growing up, we have a chance to kind of learn how to and compassion, and that way opportunity for like growth experience as much as anything. So
Gosh, you just said a lot of great things there. You broke up a little bit at the end, but I think what I heard you saying is that even if you didn't receive that nourishment as a child, we have the capacity to generate it for ourselves. Is that right? I didn't say it as beautifully as you just put it, but yeah, I agree.
So I have something, I missed that. Could you explain how to do the self-soothing, or was it just you can't do it?
yeah, well, there's whole reason, you know, if you've heard of Kristen, we'll talk off, but like, yeah, there are actual exercises you do, you know, to, you know, create a self-compassion practice self. And, you know, like not all tools work for everyone. Kind of got to, you know, kind of tinker with what works for you. But yeah, there are definitely things that you can do to generate that feeling and to hold yourself kindly no matter what's happening internally. So yeah.
Is it like
Yeah.
somatic or both?
It can be both. It can be whatever works for you. Yeah.
I think Thich Nhat Hanh's approach often is that too, is very much of the self-learning, caring for our inner baby, whether it's anger, fear, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think Zazen can very much, depending on how, the setup. I remember when I first sat with my teacher, feeling that kind of that love. And she didn't use that word, of course, but man, you're just sitting there with her, and there was this pervasive kindness there that just entered. Because when we're sitting Zazen, we are intentionally making ourselves more receptive to the universe and to what's around us. And that can be very, very difficult if we don't have trust, if we don't see ourselves worthy of care. That degree of receptivity can get compromised. So working at it and trusting and being around people, around Sangha members who are dedicated like yourselves to wanting the best for the world, right? This is the reasons why we do this practice, is we want the world to be a safe and loving place to exist in. That's what the reduction of suffering is all about, right?
So I have another thing. In listening to you define Dharma as a type of nourishment, that makes me think of the Western idea, obviously, of health um, and living a healthy life. So I don't have any explicit questions right now, but this prompted something I'd like to explore, maybe via email or talking with you later and previous next week's about what is Dharma, what is health, what are the aspects of health, like a Western idea of a healthy life in a scientific point of view versus a Zen Buddhist Dharma nourishment point of view, how those intertwine.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great. I'd love to talk with you more. Um, my sense is though that we tend to dichotomize and make it very dualistic. Like there's the material world, there's the physical nourishment, there's the food, and then there's the psychological world of attachment and that kind of and that kind of thing that takes place. And we make this kind of separation between the two. But even sometimes we create these diets for ourselves, for example, and I've been, we create these that we aspire to eat a certain kind of food. Maybe we want to be vegetarian. And then we go visit with our loved ones and they're serving meat. And so what do we do? What do we do in those situations where we have this personal vow to maybe to eat food that is not meat based, and yet we're served meat. And sometimes we're in a situation we just can't get out of it, and it's hard to say no. I know I have a hard time saying no at times. If you can say no, I mean that's another thing. But the food before us isn't just simply the material. It's embedded with all kinds of other things that the person that made it, and the feelings that were generated around the creation of it. And we can make this a contemplation, like where did that food come from? And the people who cared for whatever it is that's on our plate right now. All of that goes into the plate that's in front of us. And then our attitude towards it, our own attitude towards it. That's why it's so important to bless the food before we eat, because that also transforms it in a sense. Maybe not physically, maybe physically, but emotionally, when we express gratitude for what's in front of us, even if we don't like it, the taste, or are questioning where it's coming from, still, if we express the gratitude to, the food's already there. And I remember, at the temple where I trained at Mount Equity Zendo, we never brought food in. We never brought meat into the temple, and it was I always cooked a vegetarian meals. That's what my teacher wanted. However, my teacher's mother also lived with us. The mother of my teacher lived with us, and she would receive Meals on Wheels. And if any of you are familiar with Meals on Wheels, they give you, the typical American diet: meat and potatoes and overcooked green beans. And my teacher, I remember saying, she served up the meat because my teacher's mother didn't eat it and it was left over. And she said, it's far worse that this animal died in vain. If I throw this food out in the trash, that animal, as much as it suffered, it will have died in vain. And that really penetrated my heart. I'm thinking, wow, yeah, that's right. That animal, I may not choose to eat it, but if it's there, to not eat it would also create problems as well. So these are the kind of things I think we should kind of think about when it comes to the Dharma as food.
Thank you.
Yeah. It's online. Anything you want to share? Or we can also quit here. I know it's getting close to our time. Oh, yeah, Chris, you're muted.
Okay.
Yeah.
We good?
Yep.
Yeah, I just it kind of tag on to what you were talking about with meat and eating vegetarian food. I tried going eating plant-based for a little over 3 years, and I tried to do it as perfectly as I could, and I still had some issues, so I went back to consuming meat. Not not as much as I had prior, but just to get some animal protein to supplement my diet.
Mhm.
And it's working out. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of that comes from the fact that it was the way I was raised and how I was brought up. My size, my weight, my height. I think some people cannot flourish on, a purely plant-based diet. And so the physical component, the biological component is just as important as the ethical component of making your decision about that sort of thing. And I don't feel that there's any purity in any way, in any form on this planet. I don't think Native Americans ate whatever they could get their hands on. And because I was reading recently that now there's some people that are proposing this hypothesis that even plant life is sentient. And anything that lives doesn't want to die. I mean, I think all of us can admit that. But the fact of the matter is, in order for something to live, something does have to die. That's just the way this universe works. I wish it weren't that way, but that is the way it works. So within your own life, you kind of have to just figure out what you need and try to be aware and mindful of it. If I could wave a wand and, cruelty could be completely done away with, I would do it. But I mean, even you look in the animal kingdom, the way that they kill and hunt and eat each other, it just seems to be a part of the fabric of existence. And so I just wanted to throw that out there that I think a lot of people maybe kind of feel this pressure that I have to live a certain way in terms of what I consume. And I had to kind of relax on that because there's just certain realities that we have to grapple with if we want to be alive and flourish, and they're not always going to be ideal. So
yeah, thanks for raising that, Chris. I think a lot of us struggle with that, and we want to live a pure life, and we want to live a life where we don't create suffering for others. And this is, you guys at Nebraska Zen Center, we're reading great Living by Vow, and part of that is what Shohaku Okumura, or I'm not sure if it's Uchiyama Kosho Roshi, these dual activities of vow, where we vow to alleviate the suffering for all beings, and then repentance, where we realize we fall short of that. And there's just no escaping of those two things. It's the two legs that we walk on in practice. We make the vow, and then we realize our shortcomings as well. And it's not, repentance isn't the same as in the West where we're supposed to like flog ourselves for screwing up. It's more of an attitude towards our existence, where the vow is this it's a powerful antidote to a sense of hopelessness, right? To vow to save all sentient beings. It's a powerful antidote if you really take that vow on. And yet we need to also ground ourselves in reality. And that's where the repentance piece comes in, right? We live in this plane. So there's two, they seem to be at odds with each other. We can't do it, but yet we do it. We try. We walk in that direction. We got to have those two. Those two are present in our practice all of the time. And the falling short is really helpful for grounding. All right. Well, I hope this conversation creates more discussion and thoughts about it. Please feel free to reach out, and we can have more conversations if you'd like. I don't have any final words on this. Like I said, I've been writing about it. I have an article called 8 Points to Optimize Zazen, and that's on my Zen Fields page. I'm happy to share that if you're interested in looking at it, but it's a work in progress and it's not complete. So yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much. I love sitting with you this morning, and I'm looking forward to practicing with you soon.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll close. May this merit extend universally to all, so that we together with all beings realize the Buddha way. All Buddhas throughout space and time, all honored ones, bodhisattvas,
Okay, thank you. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Nebraska Zen Center. Thanks, Lincoln Zen Center. Good.
Any
All right.
announcements? Sorry.
Announcements?
Hello? We want to make a couple announcements if I remember.
Okay, go for it.
Well, one big announcement is our fundraiser is coming up for the spring, and it's going to be centered around an auction. And so there's details about that in the newsletter, but we're looking for things that we can put up for auction. So donations, things like material items that might be interesting in a value, or gift cards to a local place to eat. Anything is welcome. We're going to set